The sun hovered just above the horizon, casting long streaks of gold across the tarmac as Flight 217 prepared for departure. The air buzzed with the usual symphony of an airport, the hum of jet engines, the shuffle of hurried footsteps, and the monotone announcements echoing through the terminal. To most passengers, it was just another day of travel, another routine journey from Washington, D.C. to Denver. Boarding was swift. Families carrying too many bags struggled down the narrow aisle. Business travelers tapped impatiently at their phones, and children pressed their faces against oval windows, fascinated by the massive wings outside. The crew greeted each passenger with trained smiles, radiating calmness despite the storm of activity around them. Near the back of the plane, in seat 24A, sat a woman who seemed to draw no attention at all. She had checked in quietly, passed through security without a word, and settled into her seat with the ease of someone used to long journeys. Her attire was simple jeans, a navy jacket, and sneakers that had seen better days. She carried no flashy luggage, just a small leather satchel that fit beneath the seat in front of her. But if anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed the posture. Shoulders straight, movements precise, every action purposeful. Her eyes, a piercing gray-blue, scanned her surroundings not with idle curiosity, but with quiet calculation, as though she were cataloging exits, distances, and the rhythm of the cabin crew. To the world, she was invisible, but her past told a different story. This woman, known once by a name that still lingered in military lore, had not always been so anonymous. Years ago, in skies far more hostile than these, she had carried a call sign that inspired both respect and fear. Valkyrie. To a generation of pilots, the name meant survival. She had been the one to guide squadrons through impossible missions, the one who had made split-second choices that saved lives. Her career had ended quietly, without parades or headlines, as if the military itself had chosen to bury her legend. Some said she had simply retired. Others whispered of missions classified so deeply they might never see daylight. But now, here she was, just another passenger on a routine flight. Or so it seemed. The engines whined louder as the aircraft began its taxi down the runway. Passengers shifted in their seats, fastening belts, stowing electronics. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, steady and reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are cleared for takeoff. Flight time is approximately 3 hours and 20 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight." The jet accelerated, wheels thundering against the pavement before lifting smoothly into the sky. The sudden weightless pull pressed everyone back into their seats, drawing a collective breath of relief as the ground fell away. For most, it was routine. For her, it stirred old memories. She remembered her first solo flight decades ago, the thrill of breaking through the clouds in an F-16, the cockpit rattling beneath her hands, the sky stretching endlessly ahead. Flying had never been just a job, it had been her identity, her sanctuary. The sky had been both battlefield and home, and though she had left it behind, part of her still listened for its call. As the plane leveled off, flight attendants began their rounds. Coffee carts rattled down the aisles, children fidgeted with seatbelts, and the steady hum of the engines lulled passengers into drowsy comfort. To anyone watching, 24A was occupied by an ordinary woman staring out the window at the endless blue. But her mind was not idle. She noticed how the cabin lights dimmed slightly, how the crew communicated silently with practiced gestures, how the vibration of the engines shifted with each adjustment. These were habits she could never turn off, instincts ingrained by years in the cockpit. She let her gaze drift across the cabin, cataloging faces. A young mother struggling to keep her toddler entertained. A businessman with dark circles under his eyes, already asleep. A group of college students laughing too loudly, high on the excitement of travel. None of them knew that in their midst sat someone who had once commanded aircraft worth millions, someone who had faced life or death decisions thousands of feet above enemy territory. The anonymity suited her. She had no desire for recognition. In fact, she avoided it. The world of uniforms and medals belonged to her past, and she had chosen to let it stay there. She was simply Anna Miller, now an ordinary name for an extraordinary woman who preferred to fade into the background. But the truth had a way of finding its moment. As the flight pushed westward, sunlight glinting off the wings, a sense of calm settled across the cabin. Laughter mingled with the hiss of soda cans being opened. Books unfolded, screens flickered to life, and for a brief time, the world shrank to the comfort of a steel tube slicing through the stratosphere. No one knew that in less than 2 hours, that calm would shatter. For now, though, Valkyrie watched the clouds drift below, her reflection faint in the window's curve. She traced a finger against the glass, almost absent-mindedly, as if mapping invisible routes across the sky. Somewhere deep inside, she felt the faint stirring of instincts she thought she had buried, the kind that awoke only when danger approached. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent years flying jets armed with weapons designed to protect lives. Yet here she was, a passenger without authority, sitting quietly while someone else commanded the controls. She smiled faintly at the thought. Control had always been her language, and surrendering it trusting someone else had never been easy. Still, she had chosen this life. A quieter one. A safer one. At least, that's what she thought. As the plane cut through the sky, her sharp eyes flicked once more toward the wings. Just a habit. Nothing more. But in the faint vibration of metal, in the subtle tremor beneath her seat, she recognized something she hadn't expected to feel again. The whisper of trouble. It was too soon to be certain. Too subtle to voice aloud. But she knew. The sky, once her ally, was about to test her again. The first sign of trouble arrived not with a bang, but with a shiver. At 36,000 feet, the cabin of Flight 217 had settled into the rhythm of an ordinary journey. The seatbelt sign had been switched off, and passengers milled about freely. A flight attendant leaned over to pour coffee for a businessman buried in spreadsheets. A teenager adjusted his earbuds, mouthing lyrics silently. Somewhere near the back, a toddler squealed with delight as his toy plane soared clumsily through the aisle. Then, without warning, the entire fuselage jolted violently. Glasses rattled in queue folders. The businessman's coffee sloshed across his laptop. Gasps erupted throughout the cabin. The turbulence came hard, harder than anything most passengers had ever experienced. The plane dropped abruptly, stomachs lurching as if the ground had been ripped from beneath them. Overhead bins shook, one popping open to spill a bag into the aisle. A child screamed. In seat 24A, the woman who had once been Valkyrie tightened her grip on the armrest. Her body reacted before her mind had fully processed, feet flat on the floor, shoulders squared, head tilting instinctively to track the engine's pitch. She had felt turbulence before, real turbulence, the kind that came when enemy fire had chewed the air around her jet. And this wasn't ordinary. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, strained but calm. Ladies and gentlemen, we're encountering a patch of turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. But the lie was obvious to anyone with ears. Turbulence alone didn't make an engine whine like that. Turbulence didn't flicker the cabin lights in strange, uneven intervals. And turbulence certainly didn't trigger the sharp alarm tones she could faintly hear bleeding through the cockpit door. The nose of the aircraft pitched downward for a breathless second before jerking back up, throwing passengers forward, then slamming them against their seats. Oxygen masks tumbled down from their compartments with a clattering thud. Panic spread like wildfire. A woman 2 rows ahead clutched her son tightly, whispering frantic prayers. An elderly man fumbled with his mask, unable to fasten the elastic around his trembling face. Somewhere near the middle of the cabin, a man shouted, "What's happening?" before his voice was swallowed by the chaos. The flight attendants moved quickly, voices raised in rehearsed tones. "Please put on your oxygen masks. Fasten your seatbelts. Stay calm." But their eyes betrayed them wide, flickering with the same fear that gripped the passengers. Anna Valkyrie slipped the mask over her face with practiced ease. The elastic snapped snugly, the hiss of oxygen filling her ears. Her breath steadied, not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear, for her, had always been a signal to focus. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of the right engine. Her eyes narrowed. The vibrations weren't just turbulence. The engine housing shuddered unevenly, coughing bursts of smoke before vanishing into the blue. This wasn't weather. Something mechanical was failing. The plane lurched again, dropping so suddenly that screams filled the cabin. Trays clattered to the floor. The toddler's toy skidded helplessly down the aisle. Luggage shifted and slammed against the overhead bins with hollow thuds. In her mind, Anna calculated instinctively: altitude, airspeed, descent rate. The numbers flickered behind her eyes, as if she were back in the cockpit, reading gauges. This wasn't survivable, not if the current trajectory continued. The captain's voice returned, harsher now, fighting to maintain composure. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've experienced a technical issue. Please stay calm. We are attempting corrective measures." Attempting. That word told her everything. Anna unbuckled her seatbelt, rising slightly as if to move forward, but the man beside her grabbed her arm. His face was pale, eyes wild. "Where are you going? Sit down. We're not supposed to move." Her eyes locked on his, steady and unyielding. "I know what I'm doing." Something in her tone made him release her without argument. She steadied herself against the seats as the plane rattled again, making her way up the aisle toward the cockpit. Passengers watched her with a mixture of confusion and desperation, as though she might carry answers they craved. She said nothing, no promises, no explanations. Words wouldn't matter yet. Halfway there, a flight attendant blocked her path. "Ma'am, you need to return to your seat." Anna leaned close, lowering her voice so only the attendant could hear. "You've lost more than one system. I can help. Let me through." The attendant froze, eyes narrowing, as if searching her face for truth. Then another jolt sent both of them crashing against the seats. Anna steadied her first, then continued forward. The attendant didn't stop her again. At the cockpit door, she knocked firmly, twice. Silence. Then the door cracked open, revealing the captain's drawn face. His shirt clung with sweat, hands trembling around the yoke. The co-pilot barked into the radio, voice rising in frustration. Negative response from ATC, repeating, "We've lost navigation." The captain glanced at her, confused, ready to send her away. But she met his eyes and said 4 words. "I know what's happening." For a moment, a noise of alarms and passenger screams seemed to fade. He studied her face, her calm, her steadiness. He saw no panic, only certainty. And in that instant, he recognized her, not her name, not her history, but something deeper. The look of someone who had been here before, in the thin space between life and death, and had not flinched. He stepped aside. Anna slipped into the cockpit, oxygen mask still snug, eyes scanning the panels with sharp precision. Systems failing. Engines destabilizing. Radios unreliable. It was chaos. But chaos was her element. She lowered herself into the co-pilot's seat, hands already moving, fingers brushing across switches, like an old pianist rediscovering her instrument. Muscle memory awoke in her veins. She hadn't flown in years, But it didn't matter. The sky had never left her. Behind them, the passengers had no idea that the woman in 24A was no ordinary traveler. They only knew that their world had tilted off its axis. The screams, the prayers, the sobbing children, all of it merged into a storm of fear that pressed against the cockpit door. And Anna Valkyrie knew this was only the beginning. The turbulence hadn't been a storm. It had been a warning. Something greater was coming. Something that would demand every ounce of skill she had buried for so long. The cockpit smelled faintly of ozone and overheated electronics, the kind of scent Anna had once known all too well. Red lights blinked angrily across the control panels. Alarms screamed their merciless chorus, and the aircraft shuddered like a wounded beast fighting to stay aloft. The captain's knuckles were white around the yoke, jaw tight, sweat running down his temple. Beside him, the co-pilot fought with the malfunctioning instruments, his headset crackling with bursts of static as he tried, unsuccessfully, to maintain communication with air traffic control. Altitude fluctuating. "We're losing the right engine," the co-pilot shouted, his voice strained. Anna slid into the vacant jump seat without asking permission. Her hands moved with practiced precision, flicking switches, silencing unnecessary alarms, recentering the instruments she could salvage. She hadn't been inside a commercial cockpit in years, yet the layout spoke to her as though it were an old friend. "Who are you?" the captain demanded, his eyes darting toward her. "Someone who's been here before," she replied evenly, her hands already moving. "If you want to keep this aircraft in the air, follow my lead," the co-pilot bristled. "Captain, we can't just do it," the captain barked, surprising even himself. Something in Anna's presence cut through the panic. It wasn't her words, it was the authority in her tone, the calm under pressure. She didn't waste time with introductions. Instead, she assessed the chaos like a surgeon triaging a patient. Airspeed indicators unreliable. Altimeter fluctuating. Navigation down. Right engine failing. Control surfaces sluggish. But there was still life in the bird. Enough to fight. "Throttle back on the left engine to 60%, she ordered. "We'll stabilize power imbalance before it tears the wing off." The captain obeyed without hesitation, hands moving as instructed. The plane shuddered, but stopped yawing violently. The co-pilot stared, astonished, as the instruments steadied just a little, but enough to feel like a lifeline. "How did you—" "Don't ask," she cut him off. "Focus." Another alarm blared. Hydraulic pressure in the tail was dropping fast. The co-pilot cursed under his breath. Anna leaned forward, eyes scanning. "Manual override. We'll reroute. Where's your emergency checklist?" The captain grabbed the laminated binder, flipping through trembling pages. But Anna didn't need it. She had done this before under fire, at night, with missiles in the sky. Compared to that, this was just another test. Her fingers danced across the console, bypassing a damaged system, feeding commands through a backup channel. The yoke stiffened, then responded. The captain exhaled for the first time in minutes. "You just gave us control back," he muttered. Anna's gaze stayed forward. "Temporary. Don't celebrate yet." The radio crackled suddenly, faint but clear enough. "Flight 217. Do you copy? Identify your status." The co-pilot grabbed the headset. "This is Flight 217. We've suffered system failures and engine loss. Request immediate emergency priority," static answered. Then silence. Anna's jaw clenched. Communications were deteriorating. That meant they weren't just blind, they were mute. And in American airspace, a silent aircraft looked a lot like a threat. The passengers had no idea what was happening behind the locked door. In the cabin, fear rolled through the rows like thunder. A child cried inconsolably. The businessman from earlier pressed his hands together, whispering prayers. Flight attendants tried desperately to project calm, their voices trembling as they repeated instructions. But in the cockpit, a different kind of storm brewed. Anna leaned closer to the captain, lowering her voice so the co-pilot couldn't overhear. "You're out of options. You know it. If the other engine goes, you'll stall. And if we descend uncontrolled, we're done." The captain swallowed hard. "Then what do we do?" She met his eyes, calm and unflinching. "We fly this plane the way it was meant to be flown by instinct." And instinct was her domain. Her mind flashed back to combat training. The feel of a fighter jet trembling under strain. The split-second choices that separated survival from disaster. She remembered nights in hostile skies, when radar was useless and every decision had to be made blind. She had learned to trust her body, her ears, her very heartbeat as instruments. Now, sitting in a civilian aircraft with hundreds of lives depending on her, those instincts surged back like muscle memory. "Trim 3 degrees nose up," she instructed. "Don't fight the turbulence. Ride it," the captain complied. The jetliner steadied, just slightly, enough to reduce the violent rocking. The co-pilot's eyes widened. "How did you?" "Because I've flown through worse," Anna said simply. Another jolt rattled the cabin, but she ignored it. Her focus tunneled into the instruments, the vibrations, the faint groan of stressed metal. Every sound told her a story. Every tremor gave her data. For a moment, she wasn't Hannah Miller, the anonymous passenger in 24A. She was Valkyrie again, the woman who had once turned chaos into survival. The captain studied her, recognition dawning, not of her name, but of her spirit. "You're military," he said quietly. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The co-pilot, still skeptical, muttered, "Even if we stabilize, we can't navigate. We're flying blind." Anna reached for the radio, fingers brushing across the dials. "Then we stop being blind." Static hissed, voices flickering in and out. She adjusted frequencies, hunting, until finally she found a channel still alive. She pressed the transmitter, her voice steady, commanding. "This is Valkyrie. Aircraft in distress. Requesting immediate vector and support." The cockpit went silent. The captain blinked at her. The co-pilot froze, headset slipping in his hand. "Did you just say?" "Yes," Anna cut him off. Her eyes remained fixed forward, voice firm. "And they'll hear it." The call sign hung in the air like thunder. For years it had been buried, spoken only in stories among pilots. But now it had returned broadcast into the open sky. And somewhere beyond the horizon, someone would answer. The cockpit of Flight 217 had become a battlefield of blinking lights, shrieking alarms, and human willpower. The captain's shirt clung with sweat. The co-pilot muttered calculations under his breath. And Anna Valkyrie once more sat with a clarity neither of them could muster. Her fingers danced across dials, her mind reading the chaos like sheet music. But beneath the noise lay the most terrifying silence of all, the radio. The headset crackled with static, a cruel reminder that their lifeline to the ground had been severed. Without communication, they were more than just a crippled airliner. They were a potential threat in American skies. To air traffic control, to the Air Force, they looked like a ghost aircraft, unpredictable and possibly hostile. The co-pilot slammed the radio panel in frustration. "Still nothing. I've cycled through every frequency. They're either dead or too weak to hold." Anna's eyes narrowed. "Not every frequency." She reached across him, her movements confident, as though she'd lived a lifetime in that seat. Her fingers turned knobs with precision, bypassing commercial aviation bans and dipping into ranges few outside the military would know. "What are you doing?" the captain asked, his voice edged with both fear and awe. "Calling home," she said simply. Static filled the cockpit, broken by faint, ghostly fragments of voices. She adjusted again, listening past the noise, until the faint hum aligned with memory. And then she spoke. This is Valkyrie. Aircraft in distress. Request immediate vector and support. Repeat, this is Valkyrie. The call sign rang out across the airwaves, sharp and deliberate. For a moment, nothing answered. The co-pilot stared at her, as though she had spoken a foreign language. Valkyrie? He muttered. That's not possible. But Anna ignored him. She pressed the transmitter again, her voice steady as steel. Valkyrie, transmitting emergency. Passenger aircraft disabled. Hundreds of souls aboard. I need a response. On the ground, hundreds of miles away, in a secure communications center, heads snapped up. A young controller frowned, pulling off his headset. Did you hear that? His colleague nodded slowly, disbelief in his eyes. Yeah, that can't be right. Run it back. They replayed the recording, the static-ridden voice coming through again. This is Valkyrie. Chairs scraped against the floor as officers gathered, faces tightening. Valkyrie. The call sign belonged to a ghost, a pilot who had disappeared from service more than a decade ago. She had been a legend in name, whispered in training programs, a story instructors told when teaching impossible maneuvers. And now her voice was alive again, asking for help. Within minutes, the chain of command lit up. Phones rang, orders barked. At Langley Air Base, klaxons screamed as pilots sprinted toward the flight line. Hangar doors rolled open, and two F-22 Raptors, sleek and silver like hunting falcons, were fueled and armed. Scramble, scramble, scramble. Engines roared to life. The jets screamed down the runway, lifting into the air with raw power. Their mission was clear: intercept the unidentified airliner broadcasting a ghost call sign. Back in the cockpit of Flight 217, Anna leaned back, eyes closed for the briefest second. Relief was not in her nature. She had learned long ago that hope was fragile at altitude, but hearing her call sign break, the silence told her one thing. She wasn't alone anymore. The captain stared at her. Who the hell are you? Anna opened her eyes, the corners of her mouth lifting just slightly. Someone who doesn't like to lose. The co-pilot's headset crackled suddenly, making him flinch. Then, a voice distant, but unmistakably military. Unidentified aircraft. This is Falcon 2-1 of the United States Air Force. We are en route to your position. Say your intentions. The co-pilot grabbed the mic, but Anna gently pushed his hand away. She pressed the transmitter again. Falcon 2-1. This is Valkyrie. Intentions are to keep 312 souls alive. Aircraft crippled. Request escort and emergency vector to nearest runway, capable of handling a Boeing 737. Silence followed. In the F-22 cockpit slicing through the stratosphere, the pilot froze. He had trained with simulators that referenced her. He had studied maneuvers written about her. To him, Valkyrie was a myth, not a voice on the same frequency. He swallowed, glancing at his wingman. You hearing this? The other pilot, younger, his eyes wide, nodded slowly. Yeah, that's her. It has to be. Back on Flight 217, the captain stared at Anna as though seeing her for the first time. He had doubted her, resented her intrusion into his cockpit. But now he obeyed her without question. What's next? He asked quietly. Anna looked out the cockpit window at the endless blue. She knew what was coming. The arrival of the Raptors, the eyes of the Air Force turning toward them, and the immense responsibility of guiding a broken machine down to Earth. But for now, she tightened her grip on the yoke, her voice calm as ever. We keep her steady. Help is on the way. But make no mistake, this bird is ours to land. The co-pilot shook his head, still struggling to process. You can't just call yourself Valkyrie. That's classified. That's, Anna's gaze cut to him, sharp as a blade. It's not a name. It's who I am. And right now, it's the only reason you're still breathing. The cockpit fell silent, save for the hum of struggling engines and the distant crackle of Air Force coms. Outside, beyond the horizon, the thunder of jet engines approached. And for the first time since the crisis began, the sky no longer felt empty. The F-22 Raptors cut through the upper atmosphere like blades of silver. Their engines thundered, trailing heat ripples that shimmered against the blue. Inside the cockpits, two pilots sat alert, adrenaline burning in their veins. Both had launched countless sorties in training, had studied countless scenarios, but none had prepared them for this. Falcon 2-1 to command, the lead pilot called, his voice steady though his pulse raced. Approaching coordinates of distress signal. Confirm identity of transmitting aircraft? The radio crackled. Then the operations controller's voice replied, tense. Negative, 2-1. Civilian transponder offline. Aircraft presumed hostile, until verified. Presumed hostile. The words made the younger pilot's stomach clench. Shooting down an unresponsive civilian jet was the nightmare scenario every fighter feared. Hundreds of innocent lives weighed against national security. But then the voice again. This is Valkyrie. Passenger aircraft disabled. Request escort and immediate vector. The lead pilot's hands tightened on the throttle. He had grown up hearing stories about Valkyrie, the ghost call sign of a woman whose combat maneuvers were legendary. She was the pilot cadets whispered about late at night, the one whose name had been etched into simulator exercises and war college lectures. But those were stories. Valkyrie belonged to history books, not open frequencies. And yet her voice was alive. 2-1, his wingman whispered over comms, his tone half awe, half disbelief. That can't be who I think it is. Keep formation, the leader replied, though his own chest tightened. We'll see soon enough. The Raptors descended, closing distance with the crippled 737. Its wings rocked unevenly, smoke trailing faintly from the right engine. The fuselage trembled, dipping erratically as though fighting against invisible hands. Through his canopy, the lead pilot saw the movements, not clumsy, panicked swerves, but deliberate corrections. Subtle, controlled, he narrowed his eyes. 2-1 to control, he said slowly. I'm watching this bird. Whoever's flying it, they know what they're doing. Back in the 737's cockpit, Anna kept her hands steady on the yoke, her breaths measured. She could feel the shift in the air outside, the faint turbulence in the wake of approaching fighters. Her eyes flicked upward, and there they were. Two gray Raptors, their silhouettes sharp against the sun. For a fleeting second, she felt the strange pull of memory. She had once been in their place, streaking across the sky with a call sign and a mission. Now she was on the opposite side, in a broken airliner full of terrified civilians. The radio came alive again, clearer this time. Unidentified aircraft, this is Falcon 2-1. We have visual. Say intentions and state who is flying. Anna pressed the transmitter, her voice calm. This is Valkyrie. Repeat Valkyrie. My intentions are to land this aircraft safely, with all souls aboard. Silence followed. In the Raptor's cockpits, two young pilots sat frozen, unable to process. Did she just? The wingman whispered. She did, the leader replied, almost reverently. Every fighter pilot had studied Valkyrie's maneuvers, the way she had turned impossible dives into survivable landings, the way she had once flown a crippled jet home with half its systems dead. She was a myth, a ghost, a name that instructors invoked to push cadets harder. And now, She was flying this broken 737 like it was a warplane. The wingman couldn't hold it in. "Ma'am, with respect. Are you really? Focus on your mission, Lieutenant," Anna cut in, her tone carrying the steel of command. The young pilot snapped his mouth shut, cheeks burning. He hadn't expected to feel like a cadet again, but her voice carried that weight, the voice of someone who had been in command of the sky long before he ever touched a throttle. The lead pilot swallowed hard. "Valkyrie, this is Falcon 2-1. We are on your wing. We'll keep you safe." In the cabin of Flight 217, passengers pressed their faces to the windows, gasps rippling through the rows. Children pointed at the sleek fighter jets escorting them. Some wept with relief. Others whispered fearfully. Were they being intercepted as a threat? No one knew. The flight attendants tried to calm them, but their own faces betrayed awe. None of them understood what was happening in the cockpit, only that their damaged plane was now flanked by two of America's most advanced fighters. Inside, the captain glanced at Anna, his expression a mixture of bewilderment and respect. "They know you." Anna's eyes stayed forward. "They don't know me. They know what I represent." The captain hesitated. "And what's that?" She adjusted the throttle gently, stabilizing the descent. Her answer was simple. Survival. The Raptors flew tight alongside the 737 now, their presence both shield and signal. In the lead jet, the pilot whispered to himself, almost in disbelief. "She's really alive. Valkyrie's real." The wingman chuckled nervously, awe in his voice. "If my dad could see this. He used to tell me stories about her. Said she once landed a jet on a runway shorter than its wingspan." "Yeah," the leader said softly, watching the 737 fight against gravity. "And now she's doing it again, just with 300 civilians in the back." In the cockpit of Flight 217, the tension eased ever so slightly. The Raptor's presence meant protection, meant coordination. But Anna knew the truth. The final burden of survival still rested on her. For now, though, she allowed herself a single moment to breathe, to feel the echoes of her call sign ripple through the sky, recognized once more. Valkyrie had returned, not as a soldier, not as a warrior, but as the guardian of strangers who would never know her story. The F-22s flanked tighter, ready to follow her lead. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Anna felt whole again. The sky had remembered her, and it wasn't finished with her yet. The airspace above the eastern seaboard had grown tense. Radar screens lit with warnings. Phones rang in command centers and across military channels. One phrase repeated like an echo from the past. "Valkyrie is airborne." Inside the F-22 Raptor cockpits, disbelief had hardened into awe. Falcon 2-1 and his wingman held tight formation with the crippled Boeing 737, studying its erratic movements. To them, this wasn't just a civilian airliner. It was history rewriting itself at 30,000 feet. "Command, this is 2-1, the leader said, his tone firm now. "Identity confirmed. Aircraft is under the control of Valkyrie." The silence on the other end was telling. Somewhere deep in the chain of command, officers exchanged uneasy glances. To confirm Valkyrie was alive was to admit that the ghost of a legend had returned. Finally, the voice of air operations replied, deliberate and hushed. 2-1, say again." The pilot looked across at his wingman, who nodded once, wide-eyed. He keyed the mic. "Confirmed. Valkyrie is flying the passenger jet." "Repeat, Valkyrie." Back aboard Flight 217, Anna remained calm, though her chest tightened at the sound of her call sign, spoken with reverence over the comms. She had buried that identity long ago, tucked it away with medals that gathered dust in a forgotten drawer. But now, the sky had remembered her, and it demanded she step forward once more. The captain, still pale but no longer doubtful, studied her profile. They think you're some kind of legend. Anna kept her gaze on the horizon. Legends are stories people tell to make sense of fear. I was just someone who refused to go down when everything said I should. The co-pilot, younger, still processing the surreal scene, whispered, "Then why did you stop flying?" Her fingers tightened on the yoke. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then she answered, voice steady but laced with old pain. "Because sometimes survival costs more than anyone can see. And I wasn't sure I had anything left to give." The radio broke the heaviness. Falcon 2-1's voice came through again. "Valkyrie, we've got you covered." "Fuel state?" Anna glanced at the gauge, another cruel reminder of their peril. "Low. 15 minutes, maybe 20 before we're dry. One engine's gone, the other's unreliable." This bird wasn't meant to last this long crippled. The lead Raptor pilot exhaled, the weight of the situation pressing into him. "Copy that? Nearest runway capable of handling you is Andrews. We'll vector you in." In the control tower at Andrews Air Force Base, controllers scrambled. Runways were cleared, emergency crews lined up, and every available fire truck rolled into position. Word spread like wildfire through the base. A civilian jet was coming in under the command of Valkyrie herself. In the Raptors, the wingman's voice cracked with emotion. "Ma'am, I grew up on your story. My father flew with the squadron and swore you saved them once over the Gulf. He used to say if the devil himself challenged you in the sky, you'd still find a way to win." Anna's lips curved just slightly. "Your father exaggerates. I only ever fought gravity. It's the same fight today." The wingman chuckled nervously, awe still threading through every word. "Well, gravity picked the wrong opponent." The cockpit of Flight 217 had shifted from chaos to a strange, fragile rhythm. The alarm still blinked, the engine still sputtered, but a force stronger than fear had taken hold. Belief. The captain, co-pilot, even the silent passengers behind the reinforced door, they were no longer adrift. They had a leader. But Anna knew belief alone wouldn't land 300 souls. She needed precision. She needed the same focus she'd had in combat, when a single breath meant life or death. She keyed her mic again. "Falcon 2-1, I'll need a shallow descent profile. This airframe won't handle a steep approach. Keep traffic clear." "Understood," the lead Raptor replied immediately. His tone carried something new now, not just respect, but obedience. He wasn't guiding her. He was following her lead. Down below, air traffic controllers cleared the skies, diverting commercial flights, rerouting helicopters, carving an invisible corridor through the heavens. The world made room for Valkyrie's return. As the 737 dipped gently under Anna's hand, passengers gasped again at the sight of two Raptors banking beside them, their wings glinting like guardians of steel. Children pressed hands to the windows. A man whispered a prayer of thanks. Somewhere in the back, an old veteran muttered, "That's Valkyrie." "It has to be." In the cockpit, the captain glanced at Anna. "How do you stay so calm?" She didn't look at him, her eyes fixed on the instruments. "Because fear wastes time. And time is the one thing we don't have." The co-pilot swallowed. "What happens if we don't make it?" Anna finally looked at him, her gaze sharp, but not unkind. "Then we go down fighting gravity to the last second. But while I'm at this yoke, we will make it." The words weren't loud, but they carried like steel through the cockpit. The co-pilot nodded, a flicker of courage settling in his chest. The captain sat taller, his breathing steadier. Outside, the Raptors dipped their wings in acknowledgement, a silent salute from warriors to the legend reborn among them. And as Flight 217 continued its slow, desperate descent toward Andrews, the entire sky seemed to hold its breath. The world was watching. The legend was real. And Valkyrie was flying again. The city lights shimmered far below as Flight 217 limped through thinning clouds, escorted by two Raptors, whose presence was both shield and warning. Every second, the Boeing 737 fought against physics, its right engine coughing, its left trembling as though begging for mercy. Inside the cockpit, Anna's hands stayed firm on the yoke, her gaze unblinking, her mind locked into the razor's edge where instinct and memory fused. Falcon 2-1 to Valkyrie, the lead Raptor called over comms, his voice tight. Andrews Tower has cleared runway 19. Your priority. Winds are cross at 15 knots. Copy, 2-1, Anna replied. Her tone was calm, stripped of fear, yet threaded with a gravity that silenced both the Raptors and the two men sitting beside her. The captain leaned forward, sweat beading his forehead. Runway 19? That strips tight for this bird, even under perfect conditions. Anna's eyes didn't move from the horizon. That's all we've got. She'll make it. The co-pilot swallowed, flipping switches with trembling fingers. Hydraulics are lagging. Right gear may not deploy on command, Anna's jaw said. Then we'll command it a different way. The cockpit fell into silence again, broken only by the rhythmic thump of the struggling engines. Outside, the night sky was alive with streaks of light emergency crews on the ground. VEHICLE was already positioned along the runway, floodlights carving a glowing path of hope and fear. In the passenger cabin, the mood had shifted from panic to prayerful stillness. Mothers clutched children. Strangers held hands. Some whispered, others simply stared at the glowing city growing larger below, as though memorizing the world one last time. When one of the flight attendants announced, voice shaking, that fighter jets were escorting them home, a ripple of awe swept the rows. Back in the cockpit, Anna keyed the radio again. Falcon 2-1, I need a slow vector approach. Tell Andrews I'll be high and shallow. Steep descent will tear this bird apart. Understood, 2-1 replied instantly. His wingman added softly, almost reverently, We're with you all the way down. Ma'am. Anna eased the yoke forward, guiding the crippled jet into alignment. The runway appeared in the distance, now a strip of silver carved into the night, ringed with flashing red and blue emergency lights. She narrowed her eyes. Gear down, she ordered. The captain flipped the switch. A harsh grinding noise filled the cockpit. Warning lights flared. Right landing gear malfunction. Damn it, the co-pilot cursed, smacking the panel. Right gear isn't locking. Anna's voice cut through, steady. Left's good. Nose is good. That gives us options. The captain stared at her. Options? With only 2 wheels? Anna spared him a glance, and in her eyes was the same fire that once led squadrons into the impossible. Options mean we're not dead yet. That's all I need. She dipped the nose gently, testing the controls. The aircraft groaned but obeyed. Her mind worked faster than words, running through scenarios, outcomes, failures. Every option ended with sparks, fire, chaos, unless she flew with the same precision that had once earned her the name Valkyrie. Falcon 2-1's voice returned, softer now, almost like a prayer. Valkyrie, Andrews is standing by. Fire and rescue are in place. Say intentions. Anna's hand tightened on the yoke. Intentions? To land. To keep 312 people alive. Failure isn't on the list. The Raptors flanking her dipped their wings in silent salute. As the runway grew closer, turbulence hit, jolting the crippled 737. Oxygen masks swayed, passengers screamed. The captain's knuckles whitened as he clutched his seat, but Anna barely flinched. She moved with the turbulence, coaxing the plane like a rider, calming a panicked horse. The co-pilot whispered, "This isn't flying, this is something else." Anna's lips curved just slightly. "It's listening. Aircraft tell you what they need. You just have to respect it enough to hear." Altitude dropped, 5,000 feet. Speed, unstable. Fuel, dangerously low. The runway was a silver spear ahead, bearing her to miss. "Brace call," the captain muttered. The co-pilot's hand trembled as he grabbed the PA. His voice shook, but he found the strength. "Brace! Brace! Heads down, stay down." In the cabin, panic surged again, but passengers obeyed, folding into positions that felt both powerless and desperate. The hum of prayer filled the cabin, layered with choked sobs. Anna's voice cut through the chaos, low but commanding. "Focus, eyes forward." The jet dipped lower, its shadow stretching across the ground. Emergency lights danced on the fuselage as the runway loomed closer. 300 feet, the co-pilot called, his voice breaking. Anna gripped the yoke tighter, every muscle in her arms alive with focus. "Hold. 200. Hold. 100. Now." Anna flared the nose, guiding the left gear down first. Metal shrieked as rubber screamed against tarmac. The fuselage shook violently, teeth rattling, the cockpit vibrating like it would tear apart. And the right side slammed. Sparks erupted, blinding in the night, a comet trail along the runway. Metal ground against asphalt, shrieking like a dying beast. The passengers screamed, but Anna's hands never wavered. She held the yoke steady, fighting drift, forcing the crippled jet to stay true. The nose gear hit next, slamming with a thunderous crack, but it held. Sparks turned to flame at the right wingtip, fire licking at the fuselage. Alarms wailed. Yet still, she kept the plane centered. "Stay with me," she muttered, teeth clenched. "Stay with me?" The 737 roared down the runway, sparks trailing like fireworks. Rescue vehicles racing alongside, sirens screaming. And then the aircraft slowed. Slowed more. The sparks died. The shrieking softened. Until, at last, with one final groan of tortured metal, Flight 217 slid to a smoking halt. For a moment, silence. Utter silence. Then the cabin erupted not in screams, but in sobs of relief, in cheers, in the sound of life flooding back into 300 throats at once. The captain slumped back, eyes wet, whispering, "Dear God." She did it. The co-pilot, trembling, stared at Anna like she wasn't human. That was impossible. Anna finally released the yoke, her hands shaking now that it was over. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Nothing's impossible. Just unforgiving." Outside, the Raptors circled once overhead, dipping wings in silent tribute, before peeling away into the night. And on the runway, surrounded by flashing lights and rushing crews, Valkyrie had brought her people home. The runway lights bathed Flight 217 in harsh brilliance, smoke curling from the right wing, where sparks had scarred the fuselage moments before. Rescue crews swarmed, hoses spraying foam, emergency vehicles racing alongside, their sirens screaming in chaotic harmony. Passengers clutched each other, trembling, eyes wide with disbelief and relief. Mothers hugged children who had not stopped crying. Strangers held hands in silent gratitude, and somewhere near the rear, an elderly man whispered a trembling prayer of thanks. Inside the cockpit, the 3 crew members sat in stunned exhaustion. The captain leaned back, sweat and grime streaked across his face, shaking slightly. I don't know how you did that." Anna Valkyrie allowed herself the briefest exhale, finally releasing the tension that had built for hours. Her hands, once steady as steel, trembled slightly. "You do what you must," she said softly, her voice carrying the calm weight of someone who had faced the impossible countless times before. The rest is survival. The co-pilot, younger, still staring at her with awe, finally found his voice. They told us stories, but I never thought to see it, to actually witness. His words trailed off, swallowed by the sound of rushing crews and murmurs of relieved passengers. Outside, the Raptors descended from the night sky, circling Flight 217 in a ceremonial pattern. Falcon 21's jet passed low, dipping wings in recognition. A second Raptor followed, its pilot mirroring the gesture. Valkyrie watched through the cockpit window, a faint smile touching her lips. She had returned to a sky that had once defined her, a world that had forgotten her, only to call her back when she was needed most. The controllers at Andrews Air Force Base, who had coordinated every emergency vehicle and cleared the runway, now observed the aircraft with silent reverence. Some whispered into radios, recalling her call sign, Valkyrie. It was not just a legend, they had just witnessed history. Passengers began to evacuate, moving down the slides under the watchful eyes of firefighters and paramedics. Families clung to each other, some unable to speak, others trembling with laughter and tears combined. But even amid the chaos, they sensed something extraordinary had happened. They had been saved, yes, but by someone whose very name carried weight, who had taken control when all odds seemed insurmountable. Anna finally unbuckled herself, leaning slightly back as the cockpit door opened. The captain and co-pilot stared at her with unspoken questions, awe, and gratitude, blending into a silent chorus of respect. I don't even know what to say, the captain admitted. His voice shook, not with fear, but with amazement. You brought us down in one piece. You saved everyone aboard. Anna shook her head faintly. No, it wasn't just me. It was all of us. And she paused, gesturing outside at the circling Raptors. The sky remembered. The co-pilot, still catching his breath, finally laughed, a sound tinged with disbelief. I've read manuals, simulations. Nothing prepared me for this. I've never seen anything like it. Valkyrie, you're more than a legend. Outside the aircraft, the crowd of emergency personnel and onlookers had begun to gather, drawn by the drama of the landing and the roar of the fighter jets overhead. Cameras captured every moment, sparks along the runway, smoke rising from the right wing, and 2 F-22 Raptors performing low passes in tribute. Helicopters hovered in the distance, capturing history in real time. Inside the cockpit, Anna allowed herself a rare smile, the kind that carried not pride, but quiet satisfaction. She had done what she always did, taken chaos and transformed it into survival. And now, for the first time in years, the world recognized her. The radio crackled again. Falcon 21's voice, calm but tinged with awe, spoke. Valkyrie, the skies. They remember you. All of us remember you. Welcome home. Anna's lips pressed into a thin line. Thank you. But I'm not home yet. Not really. There's always another flight, another challenge. That's the nature of this life. The lead Raptor dipped low once more, engines screaming in salute. The younger pilot followed, banking elegantly, leaving trails of vapor in the cold night air. The sound carried across the tarmac, a roar that seemed to shake the very ground and echo in the hearts of every survivor. For the passengers, the emergency personnel, and even the nearby air traffic controllers, the roar was more than sound. It was a signal. Valkyrie had returned. On the runway, rescue teams helped passengers down, many hugging each other tightly. A few brave enough to approach the cockpit looked up at Anna as she stepped out. Cameras flashed, capturing the calm, composed figure who had faced death in the skies and emerged victorious. Yet she remained almost anonymous, letting the recognition come to her without claiming it. A firefighter, still catching his breath, muttered to a colleague, That woman? I've never seen anyone do what she just did. Not in movies. Not in training. That was something else. Anna walked down the steps slowly, keeping her eyes on the runway and the circling jets above. She could feel the pulse of the world beneath her, the silent acknowledgement of countless lives saved. Each step was measured, deliberate, the echo of years in military discipline, and the grace of someone who had lived many lifetimes in the air. A small crowd had gathered, reporters now approaching cautiously, microphones extended. Ms. Miller-Valkyrie, how did you survive? How did you keep everyone alive? One called. Anna looked toward them, her gray-blue eyes steady, unwavering. It wasn't me alone. It was the crew, the people on board, and sometimes the sky itself guides you when you refuse to give up. Her words, calm yet profound, resonated beyond the runway. They were not just answers. They were a reminder of what courage looked like in its purest form, quiet, steadfast, and resolute in the face of impossibility. As the Raptors ascended once more, banking in formation, the roar of their engines filled the air. Passengers and emergency personnel alike turned to look, awestruck. It was a final salute, a recognition that transcended medals or headlines. Valkyrie had returned, not for glory, not for fame, but to remind the world that skill, courage, and instinct could still shape destiny. In that moment, Anna allowed herself a private acknowledgement. She had saved hundreds, led from the cockpit under impossible odds, and now the sky itself had honored her. The F-22s, the air traffic controllers, the passengers, even those watching from miles away through news feeds, they all bore witness. And for the first time in years, she felt the full weight of her legacy. The roar of the F-22s echoed long after they peeled away into the horizon, a sound of triumph, recognition, and pure, unyielding power. The sky had remembered Valkyrie, and so had the world. Anna Miller, once anonymous, once forgotten, now stepped fully back into the light, a silent hero whose story would be told for generations, not because she sought it, but because the sky itself demanded remembrance. And as the wind whispered through the engines, and the lights of Andrews flickered behind her, she knew one undeniable truth. Heroes may fade into legend, but legends never truly die.